Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Aquarius Rising Africa and focus on Australia. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the beautiful world you are. Happy to be back with you after I've been woman down for a bit. Sure, I look a bit rough around the edges, I have to say. And mega flood warnings here today. And this wind is howling. The trees are like flat. So I might be blown out of the door here any second. So if you guys see me over in Oz, I'll be waving. You can catch me. Anyway, I have a wonderful guest, two guests this morning. Of course, Rachel Vaughan, who is no stranger to this channel, and joined by her brother, Andrew McIntyre, today. And they are really big in exposing the Beaumont case in which their father was involved. So I'm very happy to have Rachel and for the first time on Ara, her brother Andrew McIntyre. But welcome, Aussies. How are you? Good to have you.
Good evening or morning.
Good to see you, Dylan.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to see you. I know it's evening for you guys and morning for me. So, Rach, girls first. So let me say hi and how are you? What's been happening in your life? And maybe you can also give us a lovely intro to your brother, because we've been actually planning this and actually trying to get it together for quite a while, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. It just, there wasn't the right timing. It's just uncanny that it just happened to be happening now when Andrew's childhood abuser, Anthony Munro, a thrice convicted pedophile, was actually paroled last week. So this is probably the absolute perfect time to have Andrew on. So, perfect timing. And for those who don't know, Andrew was a witness on the day that the Beaumont children were taken to our childhood home at Edwardstown, Macklin Street, Edwardstown, on the Australia Day 1966 when they went missing.
What's the date of Australia Day as a matter of interest? What is the date?
26th of January, 1966. So you got your 3 6s in there. We know how they love that.
I somehow knew it was going to be an Aquarius. That's an Aquarius, falls into the zone of Aquarius.
Oh, so, isn't that interesting? Okay.
And that was and I'm born on the 10th of February, 1966. How interesting.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. That's interesting. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. We've got some interesting birth dates in the family. Andrew's the 1st of November, which on the other half of the world would still be Halloween. So, that's part of the reason why he's been so targeted, but it's also because he's part of the McIntyre family. McIntyre meaning son of a Mason.
Right. Yeah. Well, you certainly do have an interesting story, Andrew. So I know at the moment you've got a lot going on, and when I say recently kind of started getting memories back, well, recent in terms of in your adult life, right?
20 years ago. 20 years ago.
Okay, so that's not that recent. Okay. Actually, that's right. We are in 2026, aren't we? I forget.
Yeah, and
2006 feels like yesterday to me.
We've been telling the story to the government and the authorities here for 20 years, and they keep burying us and they keep burying everything.
I would love to hear from you. Perhaps you could walk us through how you started regaining your memories. Rachel, you've been such an amazing, one of the most open guests on Aquarius Rising Africa, for sure. You've shared things, and I mean, we all know it's not easy to share this information. And I know, Andrew, as you said, 20 years you've been talking as well, and it's really good to have you here. So maybe you can talk us through the process of you awakening, remembering, and what it's been like for you in the walk, because as Rachel was saying, you were actually a witness on that day.
Yeah, and my friends were as well. That'd be one of the most witnessed abductions and murders that we've ever had. I would say probably more than 100 people knew everything, and SAPOL knew everything. But we'll get into that later. The thing is, though, our father and people around him kept Rachel and I and the other siblings so traumatized through our life that you didn't have time to remember something bad that happened in the past, because there's always something bad happening today, and the fear of something bad that was going to happen in the future. But how it all came about for me was my life was so traumatic. My anxiety levels were so high. I don't know how I got here this far, because you live your life permanently. I had a speech impediment. I could hardly talk from the time I was a small kid. I managed to kick it off when I was 40. As soon as I realized what was going on, I started to remember stuff. Then my speech impediment disappeared. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. But basically, Rachel wrote a letter to our father, and she sent it to him in 2006, as far as I know. And he'd also written this bizarre Maxi Remembers, and he was putting all sorts of stuff in there about me being a predator and predating on people and all sorts of weird stuff. And when I read it, I thought, he's losing the plot. Like, how can he write that sort of stuff about me? So between that turned the key for me. Rachel's letter, that finished it off. And my son and I were over at Stansbury, and my father used to come over there occasionally from Geelong just to check to see the bodies were okay that he'd buried. And he started berating me in front of my son and getting stuck into me because I had made Rachel write this letter accusing him of all sorts of stuff, like raping her when she was a child. And I just looked at him in embarrassment for him. And as he's screaming at me, it's all coming back. And I'm thinking, my God, I'm in the room with a psychopathic murderer, and I'm looking for a safe passage out the door for my son and I. And we shot through. We went back to Adelaide. But that's when it started. And then Ruth read the letter, and she started coming forward. That's Ruth Collins, my sister. She started coming forward a lot, because between Ruth and I, we saw everything that happened at Macklin Street. Ruth withheld some of the gruesome details. I didn't. So that's how we started to remember. It had been suppressed for so many years, and then all of a sudden it was out there. And I thought everything was going to be solved in a few weeks, especially when I remembered where the Beaumont children were buried, because Anthony Munro took me over to York Peninsula and showed me.
Yeah.
What do you... Sorry. What just so the audience knows, we do have a bit of a lag as well, so bear with us if we speak over each other from time to time. Take us to the day, and before I say that, I would love to have you back on the show again to really talk about your experience, because you one of these children that you literally remembered from birth. And that's so interesting, because obviously when a baby is born in such a hypervigilant state, in that environment, all your senses are on high alert. And it's interesting because on my solutions channel, I did a little section, a show on hypervigilance, and is speaking exactly about this. When the children are born in this hypervigilant state, already coming into that environment of, as you say, having a psychopath murdering father, and along with other things, your senses were on such high alert, and even so that it's enabled you to have such a good memory. And that's why people always say, and I want to just point this out, because people often will say, how do the survivors remember all of this? This is how they remember. And I want to just really use that as an example here, because when a child is born into such a hypervigilant, such a dangerous family, their soul speaks. Their soul is on high alert all the time. They have memories that they recall conversations, they recall things, they remember smells, they remember conversations when they're 6 months old that they can decode. This is how. So I want to just point that out when people ask that question. Sorry, I just wanted to bring that in there. But I would love to have you on again to talk more about that. But right now, just for the sake of dealing with the Beaumont situation and where you guys are at and what you're dealing with right now, because there's a lot. I would love for you maybe just to take us back to what you remember on the day of what you witnessed with your dad and the Beaumont kids, because you're a witness to that.
I can make it very brief because it's very complicated. I've made extensive statements signed with a barrister that police have had for a long time. I put together the first major statement on what happened that day in 2011. And even in 2011, I told the police where the Beaumont children were buried. 2015, I just added a little bit to it, but not much. So police have known exactly where the Beaumont children have been buried since 2011. Prior to that, they didn't know. My father, that was his bargaining chip, that they didn't know where he had buried them. But I did. So I wrote all this stuff down. Now, I can send you that. It can be posted to you, and you can put it on the internet. It doesn't matter. The people that are named in there, most of them have died by now. But basically, we'd arranged that Tony and our friends, young friends, were in a skin diving club, and we were working on retrieving, stuff that had went into the water after our big main jetty down at Glenelg. It was wiped out in 1948. We had a big storm. And so it was all planned. We'd been down there the previous year. We'd worked on it for 2 summers. And anyway, I was already with my gear. I'm walking up the driveway when Tony arrived with Bruce Larwood sitting next to him. Clinton, his cousin, was in the back, and they were about to go around and pick up Peter Slade, whose father was the commandant for the boys' home at Glandore. A mate of my father's, because my father would have access to boys there. And so he walks up the driveway, and he told me that I couldn't go because I wasn't old enough. Well, that spun me out because I'd been diving 12 years old. I'd been diving for 3 years. Anyway, I burst into tears, and they left. But Max came out, and he told me I had to go and spend the day down in the garage cleaning, and it was over 40 degrees centigrade. It was a really hot day. So, pretty much I just stayed in the shed all day, and my sisters had their instructions. And then but I did see him walk down the driveway with only a beach towel and bathers and no skin diving gear. So it was just a bullshit story that he told me, that him and all his mates were going to go and dive on the wrecked Glenelg jetty. They had planned other things. I don't know how the day unfolded. I can only tell you what I know, but everybody was in on it but me. And mid-afternoon, everybody came back. But I did see my father walk and leave in a black 1946 Pontiac, and that belonged to Alan Knight, but it may have had Wayne Brown driving it at the time. My father didn't have his car, which was a white Zephyr, and that had been out on loan overnight. So pretty much the afternoon, my father comes home covered in blood, takes his clothes off, throws them in the laundry basket, because Ruth saw that, and then had a shower. Then he came out, told me I could come into the house. I walked in. I'm making this very brief. Tony came to the door, bawling his eyes out and rattling the front door, and I opened it. He ran into Max. He went up to him, because then I went into the laundry. I could see what's happening. And he told Max something. And Max went, shit, 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 and put his hands up to the side of his head and rocked backwards and forwards. Those poor little kids or something, which was just something for us to hear. What had happened was that Tony had witnessed the murdering of the children, and and others, and he'd rung the police and told them everything. The police rang our house, and he picked the phone up, and he started to panic. That's just before Tony came to the door. And so he barked out instructions to Tony, who ran around taking knives and forks and stuff, I don't know why, out of the drawer. He went out, and they they shot through. They disappeared. And then they came back with my father's white Zephyr and other people. There was like 4 men in the car. And Tony, he was pretty calm. My father was having a nervous breakdown. Like he couldn't even speak. He was as white as a sheet. I'd never seen him like that before. He was panicking because the police knew what had happened. And I had to go down. Had to go down the back and wait on the lawn. Tony was running backwards and forwards, loading up the boat with skin diving equipment. And I had to, I'm being very, very vague on this. I had to stay on the back lawn and everybody disappeared. So I ran up the side of the house to see what was going on. Tony tried to catch me and the boot of the Zephyr was being slammed down when I ran up to the front of the house to see what was going on. My father wasn't there. He'd walked Ruth inside and told her to stay in her room, I think. And Claire, my older sister, had gone over to her friend's place, Jane's, on the corner. Prior to that, they'd been with my father tending to the dead children in the boot of his car, as witnessed by Ruth, my sister, brushing blood and sand out of their hair and all this sort of thing. And Ruth gave this very descriptive expression in detail of how they looked. You know, they were in a state of post-mortem, dehydration and colouring up of the cheeks and all this sort of thing and blood in their hair. And by the time I ran out the front, my father was pulling the boat up the driveway. How he had the strength to do it, I don't know. He hooked it up to the back of the car, which was facing the wrong way on the wrong side of the street. And then he said to Tony, "What's he doing here? Send him down to Bruce's." And Tony said, "Oh, Bruce is not home." Bruce didn't get home until 11 o'clock that evening, and because he was still talking to police, trying to explain what happened to the Beaumont children. And then my father said, "I'll take him to your place." And they took off. Max went back inside and the car drove off, but they grabbed my sister Claire as well, shoved her in the car like an abduction of a child, and off they went. And then my father said, he was still there, he said, "What's he doing here?" And the Bruce thing, "Bruce is not here. Take him with you down to your house." And I opened Tony's door and it looked like there'd been an axe murder in the front of his car. The little boy had his penis amputated and he'd bled to death on Tony's front seat. And all of the blood from one small child was on the seat and on the floor. And I'll give you much more detail about the whole thing, but I'm making this very, very quick. So I went down to Tony's place with him and he then told me to, always barking out these instructions, you did what you were told. I stood on the footpath and watched him with a bucket of water clean his car out and vacuum the sand out and everything. And then he left me at his place down at Glenelg, his mother's house, went back, picked up my suitcase and dropped me off into the city. And then I'm going up to Loxton for 2 weeks. They got rid of me and sent me up to stay with my uncle and auntie at Loxton. And by the time I came back, I'd forgotten all about it until Tony walked up behind me, grabbed me, threw me into the car, drove over to Stansbury at 100 miles an hour. That's as fast as his company car would go. Never slowed down for the towns or anything. And then dropped me off. And my grandfather gave me the story about sheep running down the well and how stupid they were and the smell was unbearable. And him and his mate had to get about 10 ton of rocks from the top paddock. They're close to 70 years old and fill in the sinkhole. My father and Tony had done that. And that's why I know that's why I can talk about it. I'm a direct witness. And Bruce Larwood is a witness as well. And I'll stop now so you can ask me some more questions because I have more to say about Bruce.
It's important to note that our grandfather had been in 2 wars and knew what the smell of dead bodies were. And he said it didn't smell like sheep.
No,
it smelled like people.
Dead people. Yeah.
Just for clarity's sake, can you explain who Tony is, and who Max is? Just can you be a little bit more specific so we understand who the guys you're speaking about are?
Anthony Munro. I've forgotten his middle name. I should know it. But anyway.
Isn't it Alan, like Max's name?
It could be.
Yeah.
He's the guy that I was handballed to when I was 7 years old. And Tony was like my best friend. And Tony's 8 years older than I am, so he would have been about 16. And he had a really nice car at 16. Nobody could get a car at 16. You couldn't get a bank loan. But Tony had one, a nice car that, you know, people have been working for 20 years couldn't afford. That's a bit strange, seeing that his mother, he has a single mother because his father died, and she had to bring up 4 children. But anyway, Tony looked after me most weekends. He was my regular babysitter because he worked during the week as a salesperson for Lever and Kitchens as a cadet. And then it was all right for the first year and a half or so before the molesting started. But it's better to be with somebody like Tony than your father, who's a psychopathic murderer and a bully who abuses you all the time, beats you up regularly, and makes life terrible. So I was quite happy to be with Tony, even though he used to molest me. I only molested me back in those days. That's the way it was. But Anthony Munro has recently been released on parole from prison, and he's a 3 times convicted pedophile. And it took 10 years to get him questioned by police, because they'd always been covering up for him. He did the right thing. He kept his mouth shut. And he had to come back from Cambodia, where he'd been living for a long time, because children were finding the children that he was taking care of dead at the local rubbish dump. So there was a warrant out for murder against him. So he took off from Cambodia and handed himself into police here. So they had to do something. Alan Maxwell McIntyre is my father. Rachel is from his second marriage to Sue. And there were 3 children in the second marriage and 3 children from the first marriage. Right. So you know who they are. Right. My father called himself a friend to police, and he would do contract murders for SAPOL when they didn't get the judgment in court that they wanted. And we watched him murder one of our passengers on a ferry going across the River Murray in about 1960, I think it was. And then in 63, Bruce Larwood and Tony Munro went and picked up 2 murdered or dead children and brought them back to my father's place, and I opened up the boot. So I've seen dead children as well. That gives you an idea. All right.
I mean, we were speaking a little bit off air. I was just trying to find exactly where to pick up the conversation from off air, because we spoke about the targeting you've been experiencing pretty much your entire, I would imagine, specifically the last 20 years that you've been remembering. Because what we do know about these guys is that the minute you start remembering, or they start getting suspicious, or they start realizing maybe this should be the time, memories start surfacing. Can't have that happen to you, right? So they would definitely be targeting you, making your life a living hell right now. What has been happening, especially more recently, in terms of that for you? I mean, you've experienced a lot, like where you've had hit and runs, you've had all sorts of things go down where literally the police were laughing in your face.
I've been bashed, bashed. I could have been murdered. And the police knew the guys that bashed me. They interviewed them. Another policeman said they were laughing about it. This is the police station, High Street. They let them go because I think it was a setup. And no suspects. So I couldn't claim against them. I knew who they were too, but I had so much happening at the time, because shortly after that I was lined up and run over at high speed in a boat when I was swimming 4Ks off land by a policeman. Run over, hit and run. That's 3 years mandatory prison sentence for not assisting a person in the water. There were 3 people in the boat. They should have done a combined 15 years, and the police did everything they could to hide the accident. And when, I won't go into detail, but it was bloody awful. And when I was lucky I was wearing a really heavy-duty wetsuit, I would have been chopped up into little pieces. And then the policeman in Stansbury, where it happened, he said he was going to lock me up behind bars if I went down to speak to these people, because they all knew. The hospital at Yorktown didn't want to treat me because I'd been run over by a policeman. It was horrific. When I went to get the report from the police, they laughed at me and said the computer had eaten it. It was horrific. And then my father just went, "Oh, I'll fix it up." He got the report for me. I knew the names of the people that ran me over. I knew everything. Rank, senior police officer in Sapole. And then what happened? The police broke into my house and stole the documents. They stole all the letters that Max had sent to 3 police commissioners, making me look like a criminal. And they stole everything I had at the time. Well, I have a lot more now. Fortunately, I had some stuff in a half-ton safe. But you think you can leave your paperwork around when you're living in your own home, but not when Sapole's, you're dealing with Sapole. They break into your house, they steal all of your personal documents. These days, they take your laptop, they take your computers. Yeah. If you're a witness, as we've had somebody in Tasmania was framed for killing her boyfriend, they stole all of the television's documents, the radio station's documents, all of her documents, and all of her legal team's documents the day before she went into court. So it's not just in South Australia.
Yeah, and Sapole means South Australian Police.
Yeah, South Australian Police.
Yeah.
So I hope that helps you. Keep asking me the questions and I'll try to make the answers short and not complicated.
You're doing good.
No, keep the information coming. There's no need for anything to be short, because I think it's really, really good. What do you feel at the moment, in terms of where you're at? Are you safe? Let me start by asking you that. Are you safe where you're at?
Oh, I'd love to answer that one. I'll tell you why I'm safe, because I'm untouchable. You see, I'm Freemason royalty, but I've never been a Freemason. And the problem is they believe in some weird things and they can't touch Andy because the spirits of the Freemasons are watching me. You see, you have to laugh. My great-grandfather was head of the Freemasons. His name was Wright. And his daughter, my grandmother, she was head of the females branch of the Freemasons called the Eastern Star. You have to laugh. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. It's so ridiculous. So I'm nobody's allowed to kill me, apparently, because I know they'd love me to die, but I have so much spite towards the people that want me to die that I want to outlive them. I want to go to all of their funerals. Maybe even want to dig them up later and have a chat. Because I'll always be number one suspect. There's a few things go missing every now and again, and well, I'm not putting my hand up for it, but things do go bump in the night over here in South Australia. Just the way it is. But yeah, I'm very well connected to the Freemasons, but I'd never been one because my father was just a roustabout for the Freemasons. His job was just to kill people, and he he got to blackmail everybody.
Yeah.
He was worked in several telephone exchanges, and he would just sit there all day listening to people's phone calls. And if the police wanted some dirt on somebody, and back in those days, it was if you were a closet homosexual, because it used to be back in the 60s, it was a secret, you see. You were even allowed to have sex with children as long as you didn't kill them or blackmail them, but you'd never go to prison for raping a child, even a baby, because it was all legal. I've been told that by the police, okay?
It was considered bestiality.
Called bestiality, and a good thing to just talk about with your mates over here.
No, hold on. Hold on. Raping a baby is considered bestiality in the 60s?
In South Australia.
And it was legal, but you weren't allowed to kill them. I don't lie. Anything I tell you is true. So nobody can come back at me and catch me out on an untruth. That's why everybody has a problem with me, because I can tell the same story over and over again. And I'm sick to death of telling the same story over and over and over again. I used to tell it in extreme detail. Now I just cut corners.
I believe you. I've never heard that. I believe you. I've never, ever. How? Please help me understand.
Admiralty law, maritime law also, Shanti, it's still in situ. If you have sex with a child in a boat or a ship, it's still considered legal. That's why they have ships in dry dock, or they make buildings look like ships so that they can have that maritime law instituted, so they can keep abusing children. Epstein Zorro Ranch, maritime law, you can see it in the port windows, the wooden ceilings. If you look at that ranch, it's all there. It's all maritime law.
But what I wanted to tell you was, and I hope it doesn't slip my mind, I mean, I'm probably a little bit mentally disturbed these days, but I consider that to be normal now.
Listen, I mean,
what was I getting to? What was I alluding to that was very important?
Sorry, I interrupted you.
It's horrible.
Bloodline family, the fact that we're protected.
Yeah, that I'm sort of like nobody's allowed to murder me. They're allowed to try to kill me accidentally. They tried that, but maybe they think I'm Dracula or something. And well, definitely, if I was a cat, I have 20 lives.
Well, we do. Yeah. It's something weird, because I've had at least 10 attempts on my life, and multiple people trying.
My father used to try to poison me every now and again.
Yeah.
You'd be a basket case for a week because he'd try to poison you.
Yeah.
He tried to infect us with mad cow's disease.
Scrapie.
When he knew, they called it guru back in those days, he knew all about it, because our northern neighbours used to eat each other. And you're not supposed to do that, because one, it's not really the right thing to do, but you can't eat your own species because you develop a brain problem.
Yeah.
And they called it mad cow disease because over in England, they were feeding vitamized cow parts to dairy cows. Well, that's not normal, is it?
No.
But anything to make $1.
Yeah.
And people were dying from mad cow disease over in England. So that's just something else you need to look at.
Yeah.
Max dabbled with all of this stuff. He hung around with legal people. He hung around with high-ranking policemen. I'd say federal policemen as well. But what I wanted to tell you was, I got it. It's back. He'd sit on, he's a man that could clock on and off any time he wanted to go and abduct and murder children and things like that. Nobody'd ever question it. But he would listen. I'm sure that he would be given the phone numbers of important people, and I don't want to mention too many names, but I know of them, that were stitched up because he'd be listening and recording their phone calls. And a lot of them were closet homosexuals. We call it being a closet gay person here, where you look completely like anybody else, but you had a boyfriend instead of a wife, right? Or a lot of them had wives, like Max explained to my sisters, that he had to get married and have children to be the average Joe. So nobody would see what he really did. And the real Max McIntyre. So he hid like everybody else. Well, Max would record all their phone calls of their relationships and give them to the police, and then the police would pay them back to radio hosts, politicians, Don Dunstan, our premier for a long time. I have to be careful what I say about Donny, but I will tell you that Don Dunstan was really in the closet. Well, he didn't have to be in the closet, but I can't say too much about these people. I don't want to be sued by the current day Labor Party, but they're all blackmailed. And I know somebody, a radio personality, television personality, right up there. He was the boyfriend of my younger sister Ruth, and I won't mention his name. I'm saying too much already, but he was put in an uncompromising. Let's not talk about him. Other people similar to him, Max would take them out on the town and get them drunk, and then he'd hook them up with a couple of prostitutes in a hotel room, and then the whole thing would be filmed. And guess what? The next day, they'd be showing a photograph of them having sex with underage girls that were 14. And then they would suddenly disappear. And I know of them that had went interstate and just lost their really good jobs and everything because they were set up. And, you know, you can make a 14 or a 15-year-old look like an adult when they're a prostitute for a living, lots of makeup and all that sort of stuff. So that's what used to go on. Very seedy. And Don Dunstan at a Channel 9 party, because that was full of pedophiles, Channel 9. And Martin Hamilton Smith's older sister was the producer at Channel 9. So
Penny.
I got to bump into lots of gay people and pedophiles. I used to have drinks with them at parties and all that sort of stuff. And Ian Fairweather, top bloke. I really liked him, but apparently people say he was a pedophile, but I wouldn't say he's a pedophile. I'd say he was just a homosexual, a really nice man to me. And he thought I was wonderful because I was 24 and he would have been about late 30s or something. But anyway, Don Dunstan at this party, and all of my cousins are there, he comes up to me, and I've never spoken to him personally before. This is Don Dunstan, the premier in South Australia for probably 10 years. G'day, Andy, mate. Got any drugs I can buy off you? And I was shocked. And I said, oh, no, Don. And I thought you would have hit on me for sex. That's what I expected. But I'm offended because you didn't hit on me. But drugs? I wouldn't know drugs if I fell over them when I was 24. I just knew it was a place you didn't go because you couldn't afford it. That's what I knew about drugs. But he was the premier of South Australia, approached me to see if he could buy drugs off me. And it was a big joke, like everybody probably, oh, go and stir Andy up. But, you know, how did he know my name? You see?
Yeah.
Politicians here in South Australia regularly. There's one that's been focused on recently doing cocaine, and someone filmed it, and it's out there.
Oh,
it happens a lot.
Somebody else does cocaine too, but the police like him, so they'll blackmail him. And I wouldn't mention his name or I wouldn't wake up tomorrow morning. But they'll get him when they want to change a government. They'll get him.
He's a puppet. I've mentioned him recently as a puppet, so people will know who I'm talking about.
Don't mention his name.
No, I'm not going to say his name. I don't need to.
We have a pretty strange state here.
We do. Run by Freemasons. Adelaide means aristocracy. Adelaide means aristocracy, and they are they consider themselves the aristocracy.
Don't like me much.
No.
But that poor guy that they accidentally rang me up from SAPOL. I was brushing on that before, and he told me that everything I'd ever submitted, and I mean hundreds of pages of stuff. Yeah. I've submitted stuff. Ruth submitted stuff. Rachel submitted stuff. Oh, it's all 100. Well, all my stuff's 100% correct and accurate, and it doesn't get much more accurate than that.
And people need to know Andrew got a conviction against Anthony Munro for what Munro did to him as a child.
Yes, I did.
And he also got victim of crime compensation for that as well. So
well, I had a direct payout from Anthony Munro. And that's why when Anthony Munro was finally, I was really shitty about Anthony Munro's sentence. On his third conviction, the judge was in love with him.
Yeah.
Saying what a top bloke he was. Nobody was allowed to know he'd already been convicted twice. And we're talking about 4 boys here, 90, 60 to 65, and 80 to 83. Weren't allowed to talk about that. What a top bloke Anthony Munro was. And this magistrate said he hoped that he would get out of prison soon and could spend the rest of his life over in Cambodia with his young boyfriend. Can you believe that? In a court?
Yeah.
I went outside and I spilled my guts to the media. And I was rokeable, and somebody filmed it, and I put it up on the internet if anybody wants to see it.
Yeah.
Because I will tell you, I'm the go-to person. I get them from Channel 10. They screwed me over. Big interviews, lots of evidence, nothing. It all goes to, because I know I have an insider who's explained to me that the criminal journalists all work for SAPOL. They get their information and their heads up from SAPOL. So all the interviews they do go to SAPOL. They get to it and they censor it, and then it goes back to the news. Well, you know, Channel 10, I was saying that I've got a witness that's seen people murdering other people. No, that wasn't printed. They just asked me a few questions and then filmed me when I was a bit teary-eyed and getting a bit upset about how the pedophiles don't get rounded up in this state until they've had a full life, multi-millionaires, and all of their victims have had to live with it their whole lives. And I was pretty annoyed and pretty upset. So that was Channel 10. And then Channel 9 screwed me over just recently. Yeah. Big interview. It all went to SAPOL. They got the knife to it, cut it all up, and it just had me saying, why wasn't I told that Anthony Munro was coming out of prison? And I said that because the media were being told that all of the witnesses were being notified. That's bullshit, because nobody ever notified me. And saying that Tony wasn't allowed to speak to any of the people when he came out of prison. I didn't have that agreement with the DPP here. I was open as far as, because I wanted to talk to Tony Munro and still do about what happened to the Beaumont children. Okay? Because he witnessed it, heavily involved in it. But I know who was involved in murdering the Beaumont children, because I have hours and hours and hours, probably 6 to 8 hours of interviews with Max, John Pike, and myself. And I've had it described to me what happened to Jane on the day and the 2 people that abused her on the day before she was murdered. Nobody can take that away, because it's recorded. And, you know, somebody will have probably no point in bombing my place. Other people have copies of this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's all very serious. I mean, but we do have a journalist over here, retired ex-journalist, who said he was helping me. His name's Brian Littley. And I gave him all my photographs. I gave him all my evidence and everything. And now he cuts me right out as a witness. He brings dead people in that have died decades ago as people involved in the Beaumont case. It's a great load of rubbish. And he won't talk about any of the people who are alive, like Bruce Larwood, or myself, or Clinton, who's still alive up in Queensland, and all of the other people, all of the policemen's sons that were involved. If anybody's heard anything about this in the past, I've submitted a lot of evidence. There are a lot of people, you know.
He's never questioned Wayne. Should have questioned Wayne as well.
Wayne Brown knew about it.
Yep.
I'd say Wayne Brown wouldn't have been involved in it, but he knew about it. Wayne Brown knew that my mother was going to be murdered. And the very next morning, his discussing it with my father the very next morning. Neither of them are shedding a tear. Neither of them seemed to be upset. My mother had just been murdered, you know, and my sister was murdered because she rang up the police and told them she wanted to come in and make a statement about Tony Munro and her father being involved in the abduction and murder of the Beaumont children. Wow. The next morning, she's found sitting in her backyard with her neck broken. Her head was like on back to front. And apparently she strangled herself with a bit of sash cord. Well, what a load of bullshit that was.
Yeah.
And when I rang up, when the investigating officers were there, he was rude to me and started screaming at me over the phone. And all I asked was, did anybody dust the key to her laptop to get the fingerprints to see who printed out the suicide note on her laptop? And this guy started abusing me over the phone. So that's the treatment that we get from SAPOL.
Yeah.
They will not investigate. I know this is long-winded, but the home that we grew up in, there's 2 large underground rooms, and there's a communication centre with a switchboard and everything, with tunnels leading off it. We all know it's there, but the police refuse to look. You know, a mass graveyard in the back. There's a mausoleum in the back corner. My father dug up all the bodies he'd been burying under the driveway, witnessed by John Pike, and he took them down and put them in a communal grave. Now, I dug that bloody thing up when I was staying there for a couple of years, and police won't investigate anything. They won't dig up the Beaumont children. They're on record as knowing that the Beaumont children, where they're buried. They're on record as knowing about the 3 mass grave sites. And I currently have a little underwater submarine that I purchased, and with 100 meters of controlling cord, and I'm going to investigate a 70-meter flooded mine shaft that's full of dead people. Can't tell you where.
Would that be also from your father?
Yes.
Or related?
Yes.
Wow. How many from what you, I mean, obviously, I'm sure there must be many more that you don't know about, but from what you guys have an idea of, including the Beaumont children, as well as, obviously, it sounds like there's, I mean, he was quite a collector of bones. We can call him the bone collector. How many children do you think he was responsible for that you know of? That
Incinerated.
Oh, look, I used to be the incinerator boy for about 5 years, and on the Fridays I had to light up the incinerator, and it was full of bits and pieces of murdered children or dead children. I spoke to, they died from various ways. I spoke to my dentist, who's a brilliant guy, and he filled me in on the early days of nitrous oxide. I'm full of information, you know. It was brilliant, this conversation. He started talking to me about nitrous oxide, and the lights were on, but no one was home. So when you gave a child nitrous oxide because you didn't want to give them an injection, and then you gave them fillings, their eyes would be wide open, their pupils probably dilated, and they wouldn't even know what you were doing. So I'm of the opinion that a lot of children died of being given nitrous oxide gas. Police won't want to know about this. But what they found was, in the early days, people were dying left, right, and centre. Of course, it's all covered up. The dentist told me. And it's because the nitrous oxide latched onto the red blood cells that carry oxygen. They were no longer there, couldn't carry oxygen because of nitrous oxide, and the children suffocated with their eyes open and died. And you'd be working on them, etc., but you're working on a corpse, and you wouldn't even know until the colour drained from their face. So I would say that hundreds of children died from nitrous oxide, deliberately given to them so they wouldn't remember they'd been raped. These were predominantly children from the homes, wards of state, Goodwood Orphanage. There's in the Mulligan report, 600 children, and that's where Max was getting them from. 600 children went missing while in the orphanage. They went in, they never came out.
106 boys from Glandore, right nearby where we lived.
It's disturbing, isn't it? 600.
No one questions this. Like, how does no one know? There has to be one or two good humans that were in the system that questioned this.
Ted Mulligan wasn't a bad bloke, but he simply agreed to, it must have been poor bookkeeping. No, they wrote the names in with a pencil, and then they got a rubber and they rubbed the name out. And I'll tell you what, this will be interesting for you. You want to know how many disappeared or were murdered? They were bumping them off at Yilkey House over probably 15 years that Rachel and I are aware of. I knew the head of the homicide back in those days, John Bartlett, and he told me he wanted to investigate them at Yilkey House, and he's investigating murderers. And he was threatened by his superiors in Sapole that if he went near them, he'd get what for, all right? So he didn't. So police knew that people were being murdered at Yilkey House down here. It was one of our first overnight stay pubs in South Australia, you know, like at an accommodation place. Really old, very low doorways, etc. So lots of them from Yilkey House. I know where they are, right? And I know who's looking after them too. My father used to dig my family relations up and then bury them with the children down there to keep an eye on them. It's pretty weird, isn't it? But we'll talk about that later because it's very complicated. You've got at least 600 children booked out of a Goodwood orphanage. Now, Max would bring them home on a weekly basis. Anthony Munro would supply him with advertising cards and a stapler, and he'd butcher them in this fort that Tony and him made down the back, and he'd process them every week. And he had lights in there and everything, and it was all locked from the inside. And after they'd butchered all the children, they'd take down the cardboard, get all the splattered blood, put it in the furnace with the remains that they didn't sell or sell for human flesh, because people were eating human flesh. So you were selling off the keepers, the good fresh ones. All the organs and that were going to the big hospital, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital on Port Road. My father was really good mates with the registrar or chief surgeon there. He got an award for all the bodies that he gave them to operate on. It's pretty sick, isn't it? But so you've got at least 5 years of butchering children at Mackler Street. And then the butchering operation was taken over to a little house alongside the bakery on Crossroads. And guess what? I have an aerial photograph of the day. They only took 2 photographs a year. And my father and his mates are carrying this wooden fort over to the northern fence, and an aeroplane went over and photographed them. That's hilarious, isn't it? That's like unbelievable, but it's true. So you've got, let's say 600, I don't know how many from down south, and then you have children that were going missing in other places. My father took possession of the children that were abducted from the Oval, the Adelaide Oval. And they finished up at our place that evening, cut up into little pieces and packaged up in plastic bags. And he told my 2 sisters about it at the time, and it was passed on to me. So my father even had access to the girls that were abducted from the Adelaide Oval. But police don't want to know about it. So we're talking hundreds, right? Hundreds.
There were also 4,000 children sent over from the UK to Australia, and only 2,000 remain.
20,000.
Oh, there was 150,000. Oh, in Australia it was
20,000.
Okay.
And by the time our government looked into it, it was part of the Mulligan inquiry, 10,000 of them had disappeared. I'm good with my figures. And the other 10,000 that were still alive, you have to keep in mind they were probably only 10 years older than myself. You know, it's not big, but there weren't many of them left. They were simply stolen from England, brought over here as slaves and sex slaves. They were sent out to work on farms where they were enslaved. It was horrid. And the government just covers it over. I know I'm ranting, but you want to know how many bodies, just multiply that by every other state in Australia.
Yeah.
So Rachel and I have seen people murdered by a father. I've seen dead bodies. I pulled a child-sized body out of the incinerator, and it had been stripped of all the flesh, organs. The head was missing, the feet, the hands, and then the whole skeleton had been hacked down the middle with a handsaw or something, and it had been made to look like two sides of lamb, but it wasn't. It was a human. And boy, did the shit hit the fan over that one. My father was rokeable.
I walked into the bathroom in 1977 and there was a man's foot on the side of the bath. So I can attest to the fact that he would take the feet and hands off. There was a head of a child in the lip of a garbage bag on the floor. I was forced to pick up part of her arm that had been cut up.
Yeah, he would sell them. There were 5 being butchered in the bathroom, and I was there just before it happened. And my father drove me out of the place, broke something on my car. All of a sudden, he had to get rid of me, and then the bodies turned up. Well, that was witnessed by every other child in the family except me.
Yeah.
Everybody saw it. Rachel's mother was in hospital having surgery on her stomach that weekend, and the people that were murdered was Con Pilates, a very wealthy man that owned a hell of a lot of properties in South Australia. Con Pilates' secretary / nurse, because he was getting older, and her boyfriend. And they'd rescued 3 children that were earmarked to be murdered. And then my father and his mates caught up with them. No, somebody else caught up with them, because my father knew they were going to be murdered. So he got me to drive him over to York Peninsula for the night on that Saturday evening. I was working on my car in the garage. I didn't live there, but I needed a place to work on my car. And the next day, we just got to Stansbury at about 11 o'clock at night. And 8 o'clock in the morning, we're heading back to Adelaide. And I'm thinking, what was all that about? I had to work on my car. And then I'm working on my car, and he starts screaming at me after midday and forces me to leave. And then the bodies turned up. So this is not our imagination.
Yeah.
These things happen, and we know who these people are. Oh, hundreds. And he received an award from the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, from the chief surgeon or the registrar, chief surgeon, a very high up person in the hospital. And at his house, my father received an award for his contributions towards science. Just like Mengele in the concentration camps in Germany, they did the same thing in the Western countries after the Second World War. They took orphans, etc., and they killed them and they processed them for science, and it was all okay.
And at one time he did tell me he thought he was doing good for the world because these were unwanted children. He actually said that to me, and that's where I finally, as an adult, realised that's eugenics. That's what he was involved with.
He sounds, this is on another level debased, when you're talking about actual processing and like bathroom kind of psycho, what's that guy, the serial killer,
the film Psycho with
Jeffrey Dahmer. It sounds a bit like
Dahmer.
Yeah. This is crazy to hear. Andrew, what you were saying earlier, if you don't mind, I want to just ask you. I always, as a mother and as a healer, I always have to ask, where the F was your mum when all this was going on? Was she aware? Did she know? Was she participating? You mentioned that he unalived her as well. Maybe can you share with us some of that, if you don't mind?
That is That's a very good question. And the same goes for any woman that Max inseminated to trap them. We have a half brother. He was working for us.
Yeah.
He went over to Stansbury to stay with my father and my brother Danny, who's as rotten as they come. And he went under the floor and he brought back all of these slides which I had processed, and films and everything, like 8 mil, and it cost me $1,000 to have them it all sorted out. And then he went back and he was rubbing shoulders with Martin Hamilton Smith, the Liberal Party, going over and seeing Max. Max knew who he was. He used to keep my brother, half brother, and his mother in a few streets over, in a house.
2 streets away.
2 streets away. Danny, my younger brother, used to molest this guy when he was 4 years old in the underground bunker at the communication centre, you know. And I thought, is he with the fairies? And then Rachel tells me the same story about the same room. She's the same age, and I freaked out.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't bullshit. I'm getting the same story from my sister and my brother about Max's behaviour and my brother Daniel's behaviour. That's a worry. And they're describing the same room, the same switchboard, the same tunnels, everything. Well, that's not somebody's imagination. But he went back there and we never heard from him again. I went to look him up in the electoral roll, and gee, the government or SAPOL had redacted his address. And so that was in 2013. Or actually, it was a little bit later than that. I went looking for him. We knew he disappeared. And then I went back the other day, and now he doesn't exist at all. He never existed. Now his name's been wiped. So he's goes by the name of James McIntyre or James Carl Thompson. And he is the second child to the Somerton man's nurse girlfriend. Yeah, the Somerton man was a murder here in South Australia that my father was involved in when he was 18 years old. He told my sisters all about it before the general public knew anything about it. That's another story. That'll take up a lot of time. The Somerton man. My father's involved with everything. By the time he was 18, he was a cold-blooded murderer. Even things were happening when he went to his uncle's farm at Pinaroo when he was 12, and my father was always very bitter that he was taken out of school when he was 12. My father was a clever man, sort of like an evil genius.
Yeah.
But he never had the opportunity for a proper education. He was always jealous of those educated people. But there were people going missing at Pinaroo, and there's a lot of stuff I could tell you about which we don't even need to talk about. Yeah. Strange behaviour at Pinaroo. So Rachel and I have very good memories. I don't know about Rachel, but I can remember back to shortly after I was born. I remember breastfeeding. I remember nappy changes. I remember my father getting a safety pin and sticking it through my penis and tying my penis up to the nappy as a joke. And I'm watching him do it. You know, oh, silly Max. He accidentally speared Andrew through the penis with a big pin. The guy was a sicko.
He was.
He's just awful. But you know, as for my poor mother, what he did to Sue, he drugged her all the time. What he did to my mother, he drugged her all the time. What he did to this young woman that he kept in a couple of streets back, he would have drugged her all the time.
Yeah. And
Sue's lucky she wasn't murdered. She did a runner and went to live on an island. She was harder to get to. Yeah. My mother was smothered with a pillow and suffocated while she was in a hospital by my father. He had 2 male nurse friends. One was a friend of Tony Munro's, one was a friend of his. One of them's name was Brian Medlin, and the other guy who worked for the public trustees, what's his name? Giblin, yeah, Giblin. And I'm not saying they were involved in murders, but they let my father in. And he murdered my mother Police knew all about it. And it was another big cover-up. She died of natural causes in her sleep when she was 34 years old. It's all very natural to die when you're 34, when you're in hospital. No drugs found in her system. She just died because she was suffocated. You know how I know she was suffocated? Because my father went round and told all my family members, and this is when I was an adult, that I rode my push bike to the hospital, I raped my mother and smothered her.
Andrew's had to deal with that his whole life. That family members believe what our fucking evil father told them, that Andrew had done it at 12.
That I murdered my own mother.
So that's the sort of shit that Andrew's had to deal with.
And then I murdered my own older sister.
Oh, that's the other thing. Apparently he took out Claire, which is utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, I was stalking her.
Fuck.
I rang up when she put herself in a hospital for her own protection. That's what my mother did as well. She booked herself into a hospital for her own protection because she knew Max was trying to murder her. And Claire, my older sister, did the same thing. And I rang up and spoke to the registrar and I said, don't let her father near her. He wants to kill her. And they made her leave hospital, and then she was murdered.
Yeah. She was saying for weeks beforehand, someone was trying to kill her. That's why she went into hospital.
And it wasn't me.
No.
So I hope everybody's listening there. It's takes a lot to absorb, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is about 2% of what we know.
What was your mum like? What was she? What was she like? Was she a kind of a buffer?
Extremely attractive, well educated, private schooling, spoke 4 languages. She was an accountant. She had but she wasn't allowed to be an accountant then because she was a woman. She was called a secretary. She handled all of the financial stuff for our big East End market here. And then when she moved from there, she trained up an understudy who suddenly took her job from her. This is all arranged, by the way. And then she went and worked for Clark Shoes, which was South Australia's biggest manufacturer of shoes, where she did their accountancy work as well. She was very intelligent. She spoke 4 languages. She played musical instruments. She had everything to live for. She came from well-off parents, and Max just moved in on her and deliberately got her pregnant. He did the same to Sue. That's Rachel's mother. He did the same to this Somerton man's nurse girlfriend's daughter. Same thing. In the early to middle 60s, I have photographs of my father with the nurse. What was her name? Prosper? Prosper, yeah. He's having a relationship with her, and her daughter's standing alongside her, and she's about 14. Well, when he finished with the mother, he started having sex with the daughter and got her pregnant.
We have a photograph of this surprise brother of ours, mother's mother, who was related to the Somerton man, with our cousin, with a member of the Bell family, or very close friend, of the Bell family, which is one of the children that I saw murdered. And they were all interconnected. There's a politician who later became a woman who later became a politician, all in this one photograph. It's one of the most important. I believe Brian Medlin's in the photograph as well. One of the most important photographs ever that was shared with me by someone who was a close friend of Louise Bell, who I saw murdered.
I have lots of photos because I have all my father's photos and I have all of Anthony Munro's photos. And this once was journalist here. I gave him all of my stuff. And he puts it out everywhere. And any photos you see of Anthony Munro, anything that was ever taken by my father, they're all mine.
Yes.
I have them. Yeah. I have the original slides, and everybody uses them. The television stations use them. And I can tell you that I've never received 1 cent for anything. It's not about the money.
And yet unscrupulous people will take Andrew's stuff that he willingly gives them and sell them. Them.
Brian Lidley, I've been to 2 of his shows recently where he lies. He makes fun of me, jokes about me. And he has bragged both times that he took all of my interviews because I put everything on a hard drive, a Hitachi hard drive. Oh, mate, can I borrow that hard drive? There's something I need on it to show a researcher in Sydney. Yeah, okay, Brian. So I gave it to him. And he sold it to Channel 7 for $8,000.
Which he brags about.
And then he tells me that the 6 to 8 hours of interviews were recorded by him. Well, I told everybody that my father would murder anybody that tried to interview him for more than half an hour, which is true. And Brian jokes about that too. Well, it's not funny.
Yeah.
The fact that Brian's still living means he didn't interview Max for 6 hours. But and what's even funnier is my contact in Sapole rang me up and told me all about it.
Yeah.
So I'm not bullshitting to anybody. I have an insider who's fears for his life, but he's a nice guy. You know, he's a nice guy. He knows it's all bullshit. He even shed a tear at the second Castleroy dig because he knew, you know, before they started the first Castleroy dig for the Beaumont children here, they had my statement.
Yeah.
They knew that Beaumont children were at Stansbury. And I was phoned up by journalists from Sydney and everywhere. And then I was phoned again in 2014. And I said, well, they can't be in two places at once. If they find anybody at the Castleroy dig, it must be the three lookalikes that Max took 3 children out of the Auckland orphanage and murdered them. First, he dressed them up to look like the Beaumont children. And then he paraded, it's a big joke. He paraded them around all over Adelaide so everybody saw them. And then he killed them. He threw them off a cliff in front of my sister, Ruth. Well, she saw him and then she didn't see him, and then she looked over and they were on the beach. She doesn't know whether they were thrown there or whether they were already murdered and left on the beach. But this is a day when they had 2 busloads of kids from the Goodwood orphanage down south on a out for the day. So it's pretty complicated. But yeah, there you go. And this guy rang me up and he told me that he's viewed all of my interviews by the media because they look at everything first and then they only put on the news what's okay by Sapole, and that's about 5% of what you said. They make you look like an idiot. But I did finally get a look. I did interviews with 2 or 3 stations, Adelaide Film Corporation, Channel 9, Channel 7. I had to go down to Castleroy and everybody interviewed me. I spoke to a guy called Marcy Hannenberg, who's a
world-renowned expert on whether or not soil's been disturbed, whether or not someone's been dug up.
Investigates dead people, anthropologist or something.
Anthropologist, yeah.
And I had a filmed interview with him. We didn't see much on television, but I even gave them a photograph of the sinkhole where the children are buried so they could put it in the advertiser. And I was bailed up by the Stansbury policeman that wanted to arrest me. He rang me up. I was over there just to take the photograph of the advertiser, which went in the next day. And there's a picture of me up in the corner looking towards where the Beaumont children are buried. And I was called a spectator at the Castleroy site.
Yeah. Not a first-hand witness of what actually happened on the day
the guy who took the photograph, just a spectator.
Just
so
a spectator.
I'm thankful for little crumbs that I get every now and again. Yeah. But as for the Stansbury policeman named Tristan, I still have his phone call. I came back and I get this phone call really early in the morning. You have to laugh. And it's Tristan. I'd like you to come over to Stansbury so I can have a talk to you about an uncoerced, something like illegal, sinister viewing of me the day before at Stansbury. And I said, excuse me, what? Walking in broad daylight along Crown land and standing at the border of my brother and sister's property, photographing where the Beaumont children are buried. I said, listen, mate, much higher ranking policemen have tried to intimidate me before and you couldn't even get a look in. Well, the guy started becoming a little bit aggressive. So I said, I tell you what, Tristan, I'm going to bring over the media, film crews, the South Australian Film Corporation. I'm going to bring over excavators and a whole team, an army. We're going to descend upon Stansbury and dig up the Beaumont children. Do you want to come down and be part of a movie? And he became hysterical and started screaming at me.
Wow.
And then he hung up. So then I rang up the advertiser and told them, and they were really amused. So they rang him up. And that must have freaked him out even more because the silly guy had left me his phone number. So then I rang up my researcher, who's very high functioning, a little bit of autism, but she's brilliant, in Victoria, and she rang him up and she would have driven him out of his mind. So
She's brilliant.
I know an elderly lady that checks up on things for me over in York Peninsula, and she said that he's okay, he's still functioning. But I can't wait to drop in and have a few laughs with him at some stage. But I'm not here to torment people.
No.
I'm not here to upset Sapole. That's the last thing I'd want to do. So,
Andrew, you're delightful. I was so
free to ask some questions.
Your story is so. Australia never ceases to shock me. Never mind amaze me, but shock me. And I so appreciate you being so open and so candid. Thank you so much. I mean, it's wild but very, very much appreciated. I'm actually interested to know you two, when you were kids. I mean, obviously, Andrew, you must be older than Rachel. So did you ever?
I'm 19 years old. 19 years older. I know I look years older, but we'll keep it.
No, you do. I was going to say, he looks 50. I was like, what are you talking about? You were 12 years old in 1966. That's, but you do. And I'm interested though, did you guys ever connect as kids? Did you experience similar type stuff?
No, because Andrew was out of home by the time I was born. So we weren't close until we started to remember our childhoods.
That's right, yeah. And I really didn't want to go back to Macklin Street. I'd walk over in the dark and catch my father climbing down a ladder. He'd been removing tiles from the roof and going to the underground room where he had Louise Bell tied to a chair, and he was torturing her. And eventually he cut her arm off as a bit of surgery. He used to practice surgery on these children when they were alive. And he used to practice surgery on children when they were alive. And Rachel would go down and see them when they were dying because they'd been operated on. So we'll talk about that another time. It's a little bit disturbing, but for us, it's just everyday behavior. Body parts being kept in the fridge because he wants to cook them and eat them. Serve them up to his kids.
Which he did.
Sorry about that, but that's just, like I have a smile on my face because this stops me from hanging myself.
Yeah, exactly. That's how you cope.
I totally get that. It's like when I was speaking to Doug that time, and it was just normal that his parents every day are trying to kill each other. The one is doing this and putting glass in the food, and then the other one's trying to throw the other one out the window. And I'm sitting there laughing. I'm going, I'm sorry, but you cannot.
You can't help it because Doug's our distant cousin. I've got to introduce you to.
So I'll just stress that everything that Rachel and I say, we've written down in legal documents. This is why we're light years in front of the trolls that stalk us, make fun of us, are allowed to do it. The government and Sapole allow people to constantly attack us.
Yeah.
The best thing we can do is not read what they say, but occasionally I ring them up and threaten them. Oh, it's a lovely house you have. I wouldn't mind that. How would you like to do a few rounds in court with my barrister? It won't cost me a cent. It'll bankrupt you. And suddenly they disappear.
We have a few houses to collect, don't we?
We have a few houses to collect. There was Ash, somebody called the White Crow. Mm. There was, who's our favourite? She's a ghostwriter. She wrote a book all about me. And
let's not mention her name because she's desperate to get.
She's desperate for attention.
For fame.
The only attention she'll get is a knuckle sandwich from me.
We'll just call her Claire. We'll just call her Claire.
I love her so much. But I must say that time's been a bit crueler to her than it has me.
It's been cruel. It has been cruel.
But
Yeah,
fancy ghostwriting a book for a guy that's close to death from dementia, dying of dementia.
Was it cancer?
Dementia.
Was it dementia?
Dementia.
Oh,
and he'd written a couple of good books in the past, and suddenly I was in a book, and all of these things I'd done. And my sister, who I love dearly, I'd love to strangle her and tear her jugular veins out. That's Simone. That's Rachel's older sister. She witnessed Anthony Munro and I in bed together, and we were both naked in 1960. It never happened. It's one of the fantasies that Max came up with. And Tony got such a shock, he jumped out and he ran through the house and he ran down the street naked. Yeah. And in this book, Rachel, who was born 8 years later, witnessed the whole thing. And her eyewitness accounts of naked Tony Munro and myself in bed were in this book written by her.
So it was Simone. Simone wasn't born for another 8 years.
And Simone,
then she witnessed it in this book.
Simone, who didn't even know where the sinkhole was, went to great detail about how she saw the lino from my grandfather's burnt down shack. By the way, my father burned his own father's shack down. He was so nasty. He waited for him to go down the pub and he lit the place up. We used to all go there and enjoy holidays and fishing and netting and everything. And Max just burnt the whole place down. Spiteful, right? He was a horrible man. He even poisoned my grandfather's dog. Poisoned him.
Yeah.
It was horrible. Because he was also trying to poison Rachel and myself. So he had plenty of practice. But Simone, in great detail in this book, described how, yes, the lino was hanging out of the top of the well and all that sort of stuff. And the well was filled in with all of the stuff that was left over from the shack. Well, there's nothing left over from the shack but twisted metal, sheet iron and metal, no lino, just a slab of concrete. And guess what? When this all happened, she was about 3 months old. It's astounding. She managed to strain up from a little bouncer crib and saw everything. What a crock of shit. Honestly.
But I'm interested, like, do you think that she was cursed to do that? Or do you think that they somehow played with her mind? That she
It's mind control. It's mind control.
Yeah.
So I have a different grandfather to Andrew because we have different mothers.
Yes,
but our father convinced the family that we're crazy because my grandfather was supposedly schizophrenic. So Andrew is as well. But Andrew's not related to my grandfather. But this is the rubbish that they spout. All this stupid stuff that our father told them. And our father did this to make them look stupid. But they keep repeating the rubbish.
That's the complete...
There's no relationship.
It gets so bad that my Uncle Barry, I can't tell you one of his assets, but I'm glad I got it. And the other one was that he was mentally ill, you see, and I'll tell you about that when we're not on camera. So anyway, Rachel has the Horan gene, the mad Horan gene. But that came from my mother's side, not her mother. But then I've got the mad Terrell gene, I think, as well as the Horan gene. But I'm not related to Rachel's grandfather.
Different family members, but he would tell them that on purpose to make them look stupid.
And my brother and sister, that is Daniel McIntyre and Simone McIntyre, are as shonky as the day is long on the longest day of the year in the South Pole. That's like 6 months long. That's funny, isn't it? And they believe this stuff because they want to believe it. And they lined Ruth and Ricky, that's Ruth, my sister and her husband, and myself up to steal our shacks. We had to build houses over there to make a claim on our half of the land, and the other children, that's Rachel, etc., were going to get the McIntyre property in Macklin Street, which was worth a lot of money. It's like a 1/4 acre block in the old measurement. in a really expensive area. And so that was fun. So then I finished building my dwelling size building with a veranda, great big concrete pads everywhere, on 600 tons of rubble from the quarry. And I just finished it. And then I noticed that my father and my brother were the owners of the house, but I'd built it and paid for it. And he had one of his cronies in the Yorktown Council that countersigned their signatures on my form. And he knew that it wasn't theirs because I'd already submitted planning and all this sort of stuff to the council. So that's really shonky. But Danny and Simone just sat back. And then I had a restraining order taken out on me by SAPOL. Oh, not by my father, but by SAPOL. SAPOL took a restraining order out on Andrew Maxwell McIntyre because all of the king's horses and all the king's men were terrified in fear of their life from me. This is all of SAPOL had to be protected from Andrew McIntyre. And I can show you the document. So I thought, stuff this, and I took it to court. And I won. I won in the magistrates' court, the district court, Supreme Court, the full bench of the Supreme Court. 2 years later, I'm exonerated from this madness. But as soon as SAPOL realised I was taking it to court, they changed it to A.M. McIntyre versus A.M. McIntyre, not a policeman turned up. But the court must have thought I was being screwed over. So they gave me the $1,000 worth of documents with SAPOL versus Andrew McIntyre. Poor little guys with all of their machine guns and their armoured vehicles. They were terrified of me. What a load of bullshit. But unfortunately for them, I have all the proof and I have it out with everybody. So, you know, they're having me bashed. They're running me over with a boat. They're having me kicked out of my own house. A warrant out there for, I was an importer of weapons of mass destruction. There was a warrant for my arrest for being a major drug dealer, producer, and grower, that's methamphetamine, marijuana, and distribution. Can you believe it? So I look like I'm on drugs. And so they're following me around until I ambush them. I ambushed them in the dark and frightened 6 months' growth out of them. And then they brought another patrol car in. And then it really got going for three hours of recording. And then 2 weeks later, the policeman I threw under the bus is murdered in his own home.
Yeah.
We can show you the documents.
Yeah.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah.
I hope everybody out there's taking this in. This isn't AI, this is real. So my half brother and sister are absolute rat bags. And this is a funny one. This is really entertaining for you. I'll show you how it works. Back when I started engaged with Max in court, he went to Danny and he said, "Oh, Danny, Andrew's crazy. He's going to kill us. We'll have to get some guns to protect ourselves." They already had lots of them anyway. They're all unregistered and illegal. And I gave a list of all their illegal firearms to SAPOL. They never did anything about it. So then Danny goes off to his mate, Greg Stocker. This is true. Goes off to his mate, Greg Stocker, and says, "Oh, we have to get some guns. We can get them." So Greg Stocker, who lives over in Adelaide, says, "I'll get it from our bikie mates that we do drug deals with. And they can get us some guns." So they bring over these guns and give them to Max. He buys them. And then he went down to the Stansbury policeman because Max planned on stitching people up long after he was dead. Max planned 50 years in advance with the Beaumont case. So you couldn't make this stuff up. Max goes down with his arm full of guns and the Stansbury policeman says, "Mr. McIntyre, these rifles are illegal and they're stolen." "Oh, I can't help it. I'm just a silly old man that needed some protection." And "Well, where'd you get these from?" "Oh, my son, Daniel McIntyre, he got them from his friend, Greg Stocker, who got them from his bikie friends that live in Salisbury." Well, at the time, the police were threatening, had locked horns with the bikies because, you know, they're just trying to make a living, and they're cutting SAPOL's lunch because they want to manage all of the drug trade in South Australia, and they're having to compete with the bikies, and they don't like each other. So these poor guys, reading between the lines, they received a minimum of 8 years in prison, mandatory 8 years in prison for firearms offences. And guess what? That was about 10 years ago. Well, Danny's been missing for about a year. And so when they came out of, Max set this up, when they came out of prison, they must have been a little bit unhappy. So my brother takes off, I think, to Western Australia and goes into hiding. And my sister's car and my brother's car, half brother and sister, who now own Stansbury, stole everything from Ruth and myself and all that. Their cars are parked behind my dwelling-sized building there, registered, and just sitting there. And everybody's disappeared. And Danny hasn't been seen for a year. And I think he's been murdered. And I hope he has, because I don't like him. I'm going over to check, and I'll just see if I can find a body or something. But
and this is what happens when people do dodgy things.
When you hang around with criminals all your life, what goes around comes around.
Yeah.
But as for my brother, my half brother James, who disappeared in 12, 13, yeah, when he was doing work for us. Well, I went over there. I regularly go over there and check on the gravesite. This is very important. And I went over there with my camera and I photographed a patch of ground that was brown, grass everywhere. And I thought, that's a bit odd. Have the animals been laying on it or something? There's nothing grows there. It's on the side of the hill. Well, Max has a habit of planting people to look after dead people. So he'll kill people and then he'll put them close to the site so they can keep an eye on the people that are already dead. Children, right? He's a very compassionate man. He'd say he's a little bit unstable as well and not dealing with a full pack, but psychopaths are like that. So anyway, I looked at this for years and I noticed that animals were digging the dirt and foxes were coming along and crows were there. And then I realized, hang on, we have things called crypt flies. And for anybody that doesn't know, you bury 6 feet under the ground because there are flies that can tunnel down several feet when they smell decaying matter. And they're the ones that lay maggots in buried animals because foxes bury animals, etc. So this strain of fly has learned to look for buried carcasses. And so the crypt flies were getting in there. The maggots are crawling up and down. The foxes are digging up the smell. So I took more photographs, and then I realized in a photograph I took in 2017, a year after my father, this was undisturbed, this ground, it's set for animal activity, until just after my father died. I went over there and there's a hole in the side of the hill, about the right size for a full-grown human. So I go over and have a look, and it's got the shape of the shoulders and the hips and the feet down the bottom. And I would say I'm just reading a bit into it here, after my father died, my brother not only went to his secret underground room where he used to keep at least one child chained up down there because somebody saw it. And my father had thousands of pages of evidence and stuff against SAPOL, blackmail, etc. Danny went and burnt the lot.
Yeah, on the day our father died.
1
o'clock in the morning, there were all these fires burning.
2 giant fires, right?
And the witnesses said that it smelled like hair and flesh burning. So he also had trophies.
We had hair and flesh burning in the incinerator back in the 60s when I used to incinerate human remains. That's where hair and flesh came from. But as for, I went over with a news crew the very next day, Channel 7, who did a brilliant report on it. And you could see the burnt pages and everything. And Danny jumped the fence to give me a knuckle sandwich. And I locked myself in the car. I shouldn't have. I just should have let him beat me up in front of the camera. But the police would have said he was defending himself. And he burnt everything. Not only did he do that, he went and dug my brother up and relocated him. Now, I was walking along the fence line there just north, and there's my brother's top, grey hoodie top, laid out on the ground with a white insulator from telegraph poles for electrical insulator there. And there's a cup with writing on it alongside it as well. And I thought, that's strange. So I photographed it and compared it with Rachel, and we both say, yeah, well, he was wearing that. And my father used to keep a box of these insulators, and when he buried somebody, he'd mark the spot with a white insulator. Yeah. So obviously my brother was murdered, and obviously he was dug up in just after my father died. Somebody dug him up and relocated him. No point in telling SAPOL this. They already know the Beaumont children and Three Wards Estate are in the sinkhole. And
plus, obviously, I told you before, Shanti, that there's, I was taken into another sinkhole where there were at least 50 skulls. I couldn't count it.
This is a continuation of the main sinkhole.
Yeah.
I'm very good at researching, and I walked up and down the cliffs, and I filmed as the cliffs progressively worked back over thousands of years, 2 half sinkholes. And they both joined up to a cave that came out in the cliff face. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened in the gully at Stansbury. There was about an 8-foot hole waterfall, and then it went down to the sinkhole, the intersection of 2 gullies. And then from the bottom of the sinkhole, it went down another 30 meters or so to the beach. And that was a cave, an underwater cave, right? The carbon dioxide in the water etches out limestone. That's how they all form. Rachel followed Max. He had a bag of skulls. And what he used to do was, took me a while to work it out, he used to take the skulls out in a bag and let the sea lice, sand fleas, the sea lice, eat them out till they were shiny clean. And then he'd collect them up all rattly and he'd line them up in this tunnel. Rachel went in there and saw it, and Danny's daughter has been in there as well.
Well, she's been to local.
She's been to local.
Yeah.
Where there's half a headstone jammed up in somebody's tombstone jammed up.
We think there's probably a lot of other stuff fossicked away. There's a lot of tunnels and sinkholes in that area, and our father seemed to know a lot about them. But I just realised, darling, the time, so we probably have to wrap up.
Yeah, this has been long-winded. Sorry about that.
No, it's not long-winded at all. I mean, I have the time, absolutely. I could go on, but I also understand you guys probably are a little bit constricted.
I'm fine. It's like a normal day for me to get up and talk about murdered people and police corruption and corruption. You know what? This will make you laugh. There's another funny one. I'm down doing all these interviews at Castleroy where everybody in the government's shitting themselves, and SAPOL is shitting themselves. I know they are. Because I shoot my mouth off. I crack jokes like, when this gets out, there'll be a rush on the Adelaide airport and all these public service. I said half a SAPOL, and that's a bit cruel. Not everybody's involved in this. Yeah. The upper echelon of SAPOL will be trying to leave the country, but it's never going to happen. They're all protected. So I'm making all these big interviews. They're going into SAPOL. They're cutting them to pieces. 5% of what I say gets to the news, but all the time I'm annoying people in high places, and I'm getting all these interviews and keep telling them stuff. And there was a guy called Frank Pangello. He set the whole thing up. He was just trying to move from an independent to be employed by the Labor Party. All the evidence I gave him to give to Marcy Hannenberg, Marcy Hannenberg never got his hands on. I've invited Marty Hannenberg to come over to Stansbury and help me dig up the Beaumont children. Don't hear from him. What more can you do?
That's the thing. We're in this situation where, and this is why I started speaking out in interviews, outside of Australia in 2018, because it doesn't seem to matter what you do, how many stat decks you write, how much. I mean, my mother's written statutory declarations about how my father used to clean the bathroom. He'd never clean anything, but he would have the hose from outside in the bathroom through the window, spraying down all the the ceiling and the walls, and she's written stat decks to this effect
because of blood spatter.
And she's written about how he ran me over. She witnessed it with his car, and that it's just nothing's being done. So we're just going to have to keep doing this with wonderful people like yourself, and sharing the information.
And
my father and all of his mates went round murdering anybody they liked, and SAPOL covered it up.
Yeah.
And the hundreds of witnesses that have come forward to give evidence about what happened at the Oval abduction, the Beaumont case and everything, all of that, they were refused to interview. We always had people complaining in the paper about why wouldn't they interview me? I saw everything. And they just threw them in the rubbish bin. And all of my evidence, all of Rachel's evidence and everything was burnt about 6 years ago. And they were making a joke, some high-ranking, could have even been the police commissioner or one of his understudies, was saying how there were rooms and rooms of cold case evidence on murdered children in South Australia, rooms full of it. So they put it across to electronic, and transferred it to electronic, right? And then they burnt everything. Like they burnt all of the Somerton man's belongings, that major case when John Bartlett wanted to do DNA testing on it. They grabbed it all and put it in the furnace and burnt it. That's criminal, right? But they had a laugh. The joke was that they burnt all the evidence and then they went across to the computer and nothing had gone across to the computer. It all got lost.
They just
and they joke about it. But we still have it, you see.
Yeah.
But we don't have the evidence from the other dozens of people.
Yeah.
But what did happen was at the Castleroy dig, which is long gone now, I put Peter Malinauskas, the Premier, really under the spotlight, and I challenged him, you see. So he finishes up doing a meet the press about the gully at Stansbury and digging up the Beaumont children. I thought, I've got you now. And you'll believe this man that's impeccable with his speech develops a speech impediment. He couldn't talk. And he was sort of like having a meltdown. And he's normally a guy that's really cool, calm and collected. And he's saying, I'm not going down any rabbit holes. Let SAPOL go there with me. And I don't want to make fun of anybody with a speech impediment because I had one for 40 years of my life, right? And then I lost it. It's anxiety. Yeah. So Peter Malinauskas refused to dig up the Beaumont children. And I called him out on my Facebook page. And if anybody wants to look at my Facebook page, Andrew Maxwell McIntyre, the Beaumonts. And it'll prove to you that I should have been murdered a long time ago because I won't keep my mouth shut. And now I'm naming people that are still alive. And I'm still here. So there you go. Peter Malinauskas refused, our Premier, refused to dig up the Beaumont children. And the public have such short memories that they voted him back in.
Peter Malinauskas was the police minister when my father finally started being investigated by the Special Crimes Squad.
Funny that.
He was the one who said to do it. And then 6 weeks into the investigation, my father died. Now Peter Malinauskas is our Premier.
So he went from the police, the shadow police commissioner, so he knows all about Max McIntyre, to the Premier, because you're selected for these things when you're in the know or the take. I have to be careful what I say, but he can punch me in the nose anytime he likes, and I'll say, well, thanks for that. I got some attention from you, even if it was a knuckle sandwich. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's a bit of victim talk, isn't it? With a sense of humour. You have to have a sense of humour where we come from. But so he's disgraced himself. And if anybody wants to look at my Facebook site, I go right back to when I was a child, my first assault from my father that I can remember. And I'm very lucky that the first 3 years of my life was at Blamey Road. And you see, and I can remember the 3 years. I've written about it. So if anybody wants to know what the house looked like, where everything was being buried at Macklin Street, everything, it's all on my Facebook site. There you go. Rachel, you better say something.
Well, we should probably wrap up, darling, because I am starving.
Yeah. Well, yeah. After that, I think it's 2 hour and 45 minutes. and it's intense. So I'm not surprised you're starving. Absolutely. And I just want to say thank you so much. And please, you're invited back, Andrew and Rachel, next month for our usual chat. So I'd love to hear more about your story and stuff like that as well. I mean, it is a lot to wrap one's head around. As I said, I never, ever not am shocked by survivor stories, but Australia and what you guys have been through there, absolutely always, it's just like on another level, more
Look, I have to
grotesque.
say, this is really long for people. And what I do on my Facebook site is I try to keep it down to short because people have limited, it's so much for them to digest. It's some people won't watch the stuff because it's too scary. I have friends that I've lost because they can't cope with me being a witness to murder.
Yeah.
Pathetic, aren't they? But they were good friends, and we used to go out hunting and with rifles, and all I wanted was a 5-minute head start, and I was happy. Get it? But I want to give a shout out to Bruce Larwood. He used to be a friend of mine, but Bruce was such a nasty piece of work that Tony and him came up to me one day when I was about 10 years old, and Bruce had some black pepper in his hand. He said, "Close your eyes, Andrew." So I did. Open your eyes, and he blew black pepper into my eyes, and they rolled around on the ground laughing while I was screaming. Have you ever imagine having black pepper blown into your face?
Yeah.
That's one thing. And Bruce was in the car when Tony Munro raped me, and I'm still carrying injuries from that at my age. For 60 odd years, I've had the same problem. Can't do anything about it. We just have to live with these injuries that pedophiles give to us. Yeah. But Bruce Larwood was in the car, and Bruce Larwood turned off the light, and then Tony's raping me. And when Bruce Larwood did it 1 year later at Kangaroo Island, he was in the tent as well. Bruce Larwood should have been dragged in as an accessory to rape when Tony Munro was prosecuted. But Bruce Larwood did a plea bargain, and he threw his mate Tony under the bus. So a shout out to Bruce. And Bruce, people never front Bruce up because he's really intelligent. He's well connected in the Freemasons, and he will drag you through court. He stitched up our friend Claire. He just made one phone call to her, scared her so much and he had the right to, that she never mentioned his name again. But Bruce did that, and Bruce was heavily involved with the abduction and murder of the Beaumont children, because Bruce Larwood, I went over to see him because Bruce, John Pike, and Tony Munro all kept in touch with me, just hoping I'd never remember anything. Well, Bruce called me over to his place. Like, I went over to give him Anthony Munro's photographs and photographs from my father. He really liked those because he needed to know. And he called me in. He said, "I'll come to my office." And he locked the door behind me. Locked behind me. I thought, uh-oh, can I walk through walls? What's happening here? And he sat down and he told me, "Andrew, I can tell you all about what happened to the Beaumont children. I'll tell you everything after, you have to please just wait until my mother dies." So I said, "Yeah, I can wait for your mother to die." At the time, she was about 90 years old. And so I did. And when his mother died, he never came through with the bargain. But he told me he could tell me everything that happened to Beaumont children. And that's because he was there. It's because he was in the car with Tony when Tony came to tell me I couldn't go that morning. He was witnessed in the car by Alan Maxwell McIntyre, who's talked about it on a recording. My sister Ruth has made a signed statement that Bruce was in the car. I've done a signed statement, stat deck, that Bruce was in the car. And Bruce has told me that he knows everything that happened to the Beaumont children. But Bruce is protected. And all the high-ranking policemen's sons that were there too, I'm not saying they did anything, but were there on the day in a big house down on the bay, the foreshore at the bay. It was the governor's first residence down there, big white building. They were all there. Small world. In the 70s, I knew the couple that owned the house. I was friends of their sons. Small world, isn't it? Being in the place. And John Pike described everything that happened. He was a witness on the day. And because John Pike was a witness to what happened, I've interviewed him. He told me everything. Bruce was heavily involved. Tony was a witness to this. I want to speak to Tony about it. John Pike went to prison for 18.5 years for his first offence as a pedophile. Tony received 1 year and 6 months for his third conviction. How's that? I think we lost it.
Oh, she must have lost it. Oh, okay. All right. All right. We did good, Darwin. We did.
Yeah, at least she got the last.
Hey guys, apologies for that. My internet just died. We've got hectic floods here at the moment, and rain, and I hope my internet will be on for Jesse. As you can see, I'm a little bit sick, have been recovering. So I look forward to seeing you guys later again. Thanks so much for staying with us for this incredible testimony of Andrew McIntyre, Rachel Vaughan's brother. Wow. We will definitely have them back next week again. And not next week, next month. Rachel comes on once a month. And so have them back again. So guys, take care and I hope to see you later. My internet's off. I'm on hotspot right now. So let's see. Thank you so much. God bless you all. Take good care of your beautiful self. And I hope I don't wash away. Okay, bye.